Hi everyone, so welcome to our first story of the week. We are going to be looking at inspirational people throughout our stories this week, and we're going to be starting off with Captain Sir Tom Moore, who a lot of you have probably heard about. In the first lockdown he inspired loads and loads of people, and we're going to find out why. He also very sadly passed away last week, so I thought it was a great time for us to read his story. So this book is called 100 Steps, the story of Captain Sir Tom Moore. On a bright April morning, a 99-year-old man stood outside his house and held on to his walking frame. His name was Captain Tom Moore, and he had pledged to walk 100 lengths of his garden in time for its 100th birthday, to raise money for the doctors and nurses risking their lives to save others. Tom took a deep breath. He knew this wasn't going to be easy, but he told himself one of the many important things he'd learnt during his long life. The first step is always the hardest, but unless you take the first step, you'll never finish. You can do and be anything you want. Tom grew up in a small town called Kidley in Yorkshire. His dad built houses and his mum was a teacher. Even though most boys avoided the kitchen in those days, Tom loved spending hours cooking with his mum. Enormous cakes with colourful icing, thick crusted pies and fancy three-course meals. She taught him that it didn't matter who you were. When he wasn't in the kitchen, Tom was outside playing with his dog Billy. They went everywhere together on adventures in the garden and exploring the town, but best of all they loved running wild and free on the Yorkshire moors. Billy was named after Tom's favourite uncle who raced motorbikes and taught Tom how to ride. At night, Tom would lie in bed remembering the roar of the engine and the feeling of freedom he felt as the wheels spun beneath him. One day he said to himself, "I'll have a motorbike of my very own." Tom worked hard at school. In lessons he was quiet and well behaved, and he got on with his teachers and classmates. But he wasn't above bending the rules. When he was 12, Tom bought his first motorbike and he rode it everywhere he could. He would even hide it in the school grounds so that he could look at it at lunchtime. And Tom's motorbike wasn't the only thing he would sneak into school. As Tom grew older, he spent more and more time riding his motorbike. He and Billy would spend whole days racing across the moors, grinning ear to ear as the wind whipped through their hair and the sun bounced brightly off the motorbike. Every day can be an adventure. In 1939, when Tom was 19, war was declared. It was a worrying time, but Tom wanted to serve his country, and so the next year he signed up as an officer in the army. Seagulls wheeled overhead as he waved goodbye to his family to go far away to fight. Tom's ship was bound for a country called Burma in Southeast Asia. It made many stops along the way. From the bustling, dusty harbours in Freetown, the capital of Sierra Leone, it took many weeks to reach Burma, and Tom would never forget the people he met or the incredible things he saw throughout the journey, to the awe-inspiring Table Mountain in Cape Town, South Africa. War could be scary, and Tom missed his family, but he and his new friends made sure to have fun too. They would take holiday around the country and even travel to see Mount Everest, the tallest mountain in the world. But it was cloudy, so all they could see was fog. Life in Burma took some getting used to, especially the enormous bugs and creepy crawlies that lived in the jungle, including a spider as big as Tom's hand. Tom made use of his love of engines and his talent for fixing things by teaching the troops how to ride and fix motorbikes and then tanks. I know we will meet again some sunny day. And on some special occasions, there were parties and concerts. Once, the famous singer Vera Lynn made the long journey from Britain to visit the troops and sing for them. Tom could hardly believe that he was seeing her with his own eyes. So, even though Tom, along with the rest of the world, was pleased when the war finally ended and he could go home, he missed his friends and the amazing sights he had seen. Day after day, Tom worked with his dad building houses. And at night, he dreamed of the adventures he used to have. The sun will shine again. Tom wasn't ready to give up on adventure though, and he rediscovered the wonderful feeling of freedom he had always found riding motorbikes. He started to race in events called time trials, and won race after race after race. Tom knew that even when the sky seemed full of grey clouds. And the greatest adventure of Tom's life began when he met Pamela. He thought she was the most beautiful person he had ever seen, and made excuses to travel the great distance between their hometowns to see her. Before long, they fell deeply in love. And you can be anything you want. After Tom and Pamela got married, they had two little girls, Lucy and Hannah. They taught the girls about cooking and fixing engines. Tom had never forgotten the lessons his mother had taught him. No matter who you are. Hannah was the smallest, so her job was to change the oil in the car. As the years went by, Tom and Pamela's family grew and grew and grew and grew. Lucy and Hannah had children of their own, and there were always new dogs. But sadly, when Pamela was 63 years old, she got sick, and 8 years later she passed away. Over the years, Tom made sure that the family had lots of adventures, and their days were filled with laughter and mischief, and the dogs made more mischief than anyone. At the end of the storm there is a golden sky. Without Pamela, Tom was very, very sad, but he surrounded himself with his family, and they helped him to find happy days again. In fact, these years were the happiest of his life so far. His family showed Tom that, and he made sure to go off on the odd adventure. They certainly kept him busy fixing things. He kept an eye on the garden, even though things didn't always go as planned. It's never too late for one more adventure. Like travelling to Everest, so that he could finally see it with his own eyes. It was a long journey for a 90-year-old, and Tom could hardly believe it when he saw Everest at last, the mountain rising bold and majestic ahead of him. It took his breath away. Together, they had the idea. So when this dangerous disease swept around the world, Tom knew he had to do something to help others, just as his family had helped him. Together, they had the idea to raise money by walking 100 lengths of his garden in time for his 100th birthday. Every day, Tom went out into his garden and slowly but surely walked step after step after step, and before he knew it, because one step has the power, the whole world was watching him. For all those finding it difficult, the sun will shine on you again and the clouds will go away. Remember that tomorrow will be a good day. Tom couldn't believe how many cards arrived for his 100th birthday. As he read the outpourings of love and admiration, he thought about all the people who had written to him and what he would like to say in reply. Okay, so that is the end of our story, and then it's got a little bit more about Sir Tom Moore. So these are actually photographs of him when he was much younger. Captain Sir Tom Moore was born in Kiley in West Ridings of Yorkshire in April 1920. Over the course of his long life, he has seen and done some extraordinary things, just too many to fit in one book. The world has changed a lot since Tom was born. When he was a little boy, his father bought the first car in their street. At the time, everything was delivered by horse-drawn cart. That car must have inspired Tom in his lifelong love of engines and fixing things. When he was 12 years old, he found a motorbike in a barn and bought it for £0.50. In today's money, that's about £9. Tom enlisted as an officer in the army in the Second World War and served in the Royal Armed Corps in India and Burma. During the war, he saw many incredible things, including monkeys, snakes, and spiders the size of his hand. Once the war was over, he flew all the way home from India in a Sunderland flying boat via Bahrain, Egypt, and Italy before he landed in Poole Harbour. After the war, Tom took part in a motorbike time trials and drove a three-wheeler red sports car. He was one of the very first people to drive on the first motorway in Britain soon after it opened in 1959. As a boy, with his mother and sister, as an officer in the army, riding his motorbike. And there's Sir Tom Moore during his walking. During the coronavirus pandemic in 2020, Tom inspired the nation by walking 100 laps of his garden in time for his 100th birthday, raising nearly £40 million for charity and providing a voice of hope during a dark time. In recognition of his incredible work, he was awarded an honorary promotion to colonel, a knighthood, and a gold Blue Peter badge. Sir Captain Tom Moore walking for the NHS in 2020. Okay, and that is the end of our book. So I'd like you to have a little bit of a think now about why do you think that Tom Moore is particularly inspiring? We know that he walked these 100 steps. Why is it inspiring that he did it? And why do you think so many people really, really loved him and decided that his story was one they really wanted to share and they wanted to donate money to him? Why do you think that was? Do you think it was the timing of it? Do you think it was something about Tom's character? Do you think he was such a lovely person with an interesting story that people wanted to donate money to him? Or was it all about the time it happened? Have a little think about that, because we're going to be looking at a few other inspirational people and thinking about why they are inspirational.